Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Generic Cappy YouTube channel. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I'm Omar, otherwise known as Generic Cappy, and today, in case you did not know, Nintendo just announced that they will be hosting a new Nintendo Direct tomorrow, March 27th, 2025, at 7 a.m. PT, 10 a.m. ET. That will contain around 30 minutes of news on upcoming Nintendo Switch games. I am very excited for this, and it was a very unexpected announcement as we do have the Nintendo Switch 2 Nintendo Direct next week on April 2nd, 2025. And with that, they did confirm that this Direct will contain no new information on the Nintendo Switch 2, but still, I figured it would be a pretty cool Direct to talk about and predict for, and that is exactly what we're doing here today. If you do have any of your own predictions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, but without further ado, let us get right into it. So as I mentioned earlier, just like a minute ago, the Nintendo Switch 2 will not be mentioned at all in this Direct. So I don't really have any predictions for that, obviously, because there wouldn't really be a reason to have predictions for it. But I had it on my list, so I figured, I would just say that just to begin with. I'm not gonna really. I don't think Nintendo's gonna go back on their word on that, just because it wouldn't make sense. Both because obviously they said it, but we do have a Direct next week focusing on the Nintendo Switch 2. And I think it does make sense, within that context about why they're doing this Direct now. Because after the fact, if they did, if they released this Direct maybe a week after next week's Direct, it probably would get overshadowed and there would be a lot of questions about why they're not talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 in that one, or like in a speculative Direct after that one, why they wouldn't be talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. So it does make sense. But I also think Nintendo does have some first-party games that they obviously want to announce. Their most recent game was Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition that just came out last Thursday. But besides that, they don't have anything else dated on their release calendar. So it makes sense to have a Direct to announce Nintendo Switch games, even if they go beyond the Nintendo Switch 2's release window, just because I'm expecting Nintendo to, support the Switch for at least another year. So today is March 26th, so I expect to see games from them on the Nintendo Switch until at least March 26th, 2026. So yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at with this Direct. I think we actually may see most of the games that they are releasing, within the next year for the Nintendo Switch, as this time around they didn't really specify like a time period about like where the confines of this Direct really will be within. Normally they say like with a Direct, tune in on a certain day to hear about news or new information on video games releasing on the Nintendo Switch during this holiday, or within the first half of that year. They didn't say that this time, so it's kind of interesting. Obviously I think with that, where I should probably predict announcements that I think will happen, towards the end of the year, maybe into even 2026. But yeah, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. No Nintendo Switch news predictions here, or I guess I was just trying to frame where our predictions are. But the main prediction I obviously just want to start off with would be, I'm expecting to see Metroid Prime, a Metroid Prime segment in this Direct to a certain extent. I was honestly, before this Direct was announced or before it was getting rumored this week, I was expecting to see Metroid Prime 4 next week in that Direct. If it does appear in this one, I'm a little less confident that it will appear next week, just because I think if it appears here, again, it will be in a segment, so we will see probably Metroid Prime 4, but alongside probably either Metroid Prime 2 or 3 or both. And so I think depending on what we see from Metroid Prime in this Direct as a whole, that'll determine, what we see next week from it. If we see a release date for it, or if we see like a big gameplay preview for it, I think it becomes a little, less likely we see it next week. But this video isn't about next week. This video is about tomorrow. So I think we're going to see Metroid Prime 4 tomorrow. I think if I had to make a prediction for what we'll see, I think we'll see a lot more gameplay. I don't think we'll see many cinematics. I saw a lot of speculation that maybe we will see a story trailer. I guess I could see that happening, but I think we'll see a lot more gameplay. I think they're gonna try to sell, the viewers on what the game looks like, what how the game plays. Maybe they will confirm if it runs at 60 FPS. I doubt it, or like the performance of it. I doubt they would do something like that. But I think they're gonna try to instill confidence that the game is gonna run really well on the Nintendo Switch in this direct, and I think that's exactly what they are going to be able to do. So I think we're gonna see a lot of gameplay. I think we're gonna see a release date. I don't think we're gonna see a release window. Um, Obviously, I think we're gonna get more specific with a release date, um, unless obviously, it depends on what the presence of Metroid Prime 4 is on Nintendo Switch 2. If the game is launching on the same day as the console, which I don't know yet. Obviously we'll see here, but I'm not sure I'm too confident in that, just because I think they're definitely gonna have Mario Kart on the Switch 2 at launch. I'm not sure they're gonna want to have Metroid Prime as well there, but I think that's the only case scenario I see Metroid Prime 4 not getting a release date tomorrow. I think otherwise, I think we see a release date that's probably in July. I'm just gonna guess July. March to July. I think that makes a lot more sense. I would have said May, but I think that's just a little too quick for what they're going to want to do with the marketing for this game, especially with, I think, if they want to communicate it with the Switch 2, I don't think it can come out in May. I think the Switch 2 is coming out in June. So, with all that, I think we definitely see a Metroid Prime segment here. We definitely see at least Metroid Prime 4. I'm also pretty confident we will see at least Metroid Prime 2, if not Metroid Prime 2 and 3. Do I think we'll see a Metroid Prime 2/Prime 3 Shadow Drop? I'm a little less confident on that, but this is the first direct we've had in around 9 months, or first full general direct we've had in at least around 9 months. And so, that doesn't really connect to much here. I mean, but I think that we got used to seeing shadow drops in directs before then from first party games. So we saw, Metroid Prime 1, that pretty much started like this shadow drop idea for first party games, fully first party games. We saw Metroid Prime 1 remastered in February 2023. So I'm expecting, and then, well, I'm not really, it's kind of hard because do I think they will continue the shadow drop strategy going into the future? Was it really that successful, Metroid Prime remastered? I'm not sure. Only Nintendo knows that. But I think if there is a game that would get shadow dropped, it would be Metroid Prime 2 HD or remastered or whatever they call it. Do I think it will be a collection of Metroid Prime 2 and 3? I don't think so. That's a little... I would love to say that I think it would be a collection, but I think they want to do them separately. I think, especially if Metroid Prime 4 is out maybe in July or August, we could have another direct in June where then they will shadow drop Metroid Prime 3. But I think they're going to want to separate them a little bit more here and, have a little bit more, have one more big push for Metroid Prime 4 a little later in the year. And with that, they can drop Metroid Prime 3. That's all I really have for Metroid Prime, but there is a couple more things I'm pretty confident we will see in this direct. I think we will see a Kirby port of some kind. For a little while now, there has been a lot of speculation that we will see something like Kirby Planet Robobot HD or Kirby Planet Robobot like remaster, remake of some sort. I could see that happening. It would be a little weird for them to skip over Triple Deluxe, but I think Planet Robot was also not much better received, but it was the better received of the two games, if even slightly. So I think maybe that's why they would aim to, maybe try to do Planet Robot. I think Planet Robot has a little bit more intrigue around it. So I think it would make sense. I think we will see at least a Kirby port here. I think I'm going to lean towards it being Planet Robot, but I think we see a new Kirby game here. We haven't had a new Kirby game since, I believe, 2023 with Return to Dreamland Deluxe. So it makes sense again, what has Kirby really been working on? I don't think we'll see a new Kirby game here. I don't think we'll actually see another new Kirby game on the Nintendo Switch. At least in like a new game like the next 3D Kirby, maybe even a new 2D Kirby. I think we will just see mainly remasters and remakes for the Kirby series on the Switch. And I think we will see one here. I think it'll be Planet Robobot. And I think it makes a lot more sense. I think it makes a lot of sense to have a pretty, I think it will sell well, and I think it'll be a nice little, get for the Nintendo Switch, but it isn't like something that's too huge. I guess I should probably say I'm not expecting too many big things to show up in this direct for the Nintendo Switch. I said the same thing in June of 2024, and I was very wrong about that. We got a new 2D Zelda, or top-down Zelda. We got a new Mario and Luigi game. We got a new Mario Party. We saw Metroid Prime 4. We saw Dragon Quest HD 2D, the third Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D for the first time in a long time. So it all makes, it's all, what Nintendo has, what Nintendo doesn't have to show. I think we're going to have a little more of a subtle direct here, but still, I think we're going to have a bunch of big announcements. And I think Metroid Prime and Kirby are a part of the Kirby series. Now, here's where we start really getting into things that may not necessarily happen or maybe even exist, but if they do exist, I do expect to see them here. I guess you can also say that about the everything else I said before, Metroid Prime 2 HD and Metroid Prime 3, or maybe even like a Kirby remaster. But there has been a lot of talk about not a Metroid, a Fire Emblem 4 remake of some sort, a full-on remake, probably within like the engine of Three Houses or Engage. And I think I can see that happening here. It is a little bit of a larger game, I feel, so it really depends on what Nintendo wants to do with this. Like, it's harder to predict these type of games for a direct like this, just because there's obviously gonna be games that they want to save for the Switch 2 Direct, and just for the Switch 2 in general, just to show off on the Switch 2. There was a lot of mention of the Switch 2, but I think that Fire Emblem would be a good like middle ground between that. Like with Metroid Prime 4, if it does get a cross-gen, I think obviously this would be a good place to show it, but obviously with the Switch 2 Direct, that would also be a good place to show it. I feel the same thing here with the with a new Fire Emblem game or like a Fire Emblem remake. I think that it makes sense for it to show up here if it is a cross-gen game of some kind or a Switch 1 exclusive, obviously. But if it is if it will be dramatically better on the Switch 2, I feel like Nintendo would want to show it off there first. It really just depends, I guess, on what their marketing plan for this game is, what their improvements when it comes to cross-gen and backwards compatibility it really is for the Switch 2. But I think those three big topics, the Metroid Primes, the Kirbys, and the Fire Emblems, are the ones I feel the most confident about showing up in a direct like this. And honestly, those would be how I feel a beginning, middle, and end would be. We normally get like a big opener, a big closer, and then something pretty big in the middle. I think something like a Fire Emblem opening their direct like we saw in 2022 with the 2 general directs we got in 2022, Metroid Prime segment or Metroid Prime section closing the direct like we got in June of last year, and then maybe a Kirby right in the middle. If it has a lot more improvements or maybe like a side quest to it, that could be like right in the middle, a big announcement right in the middle. I think that'd be pretty swell as well. But I think that is like the big things that we will see in a direct like this. A lot of the other things I have listed here are speculation or things I just wanted to mention a little bit, as personal wants. So yeah, I think we got the 3 that I think are big. If I used to, in my previous predictions, I used to do like 50%, 100%, 80%, stuff like that. If I had to guess what those 3 are, they're probably in like the 70% tier and higher. I think Metroid Prime is probably like in the 90s. A new Kirby's probably like in the 85 to 90 range. And then a new Fire Emblem's probably like in the 70 to 90 range. Percent chance of showing up in this direct. I do have 2 more things listed in that section on my little notepad here, but those are it's a new Rhythm Heaven and a new Mario sports game. I'm thinking Mario Baseball. The reason why I have a new Rhythm Heaven listed here, and I've been predicting a new Rhythm Heaven for a little bit now, is just because when you look at like the 3DS one, I believe it was called Rhythm Heaven Final Remix. Like the collection of all the, or like all the big Rhythm Heaven mini games. We saw that release at the end of the 3DS generation, the Wii U generation, like within that range. And we saw the Wii U one, which I believe was, I don't remember the Wii U one was called, but we saw that one also released. I mean, Wii one, not the Wii one. We saw the what the Wii one was that one also released at the end of the Wii generation. And so for me, I'm feeling that Rhythm Heaven has become a little bit of a series that, it isn't a huge priority for Nintendo, but it's still one where, it would be a good thing to add to a lineup during like a transitional year for the company. Like, we have big Switch 2 games coming out obviously at some point this year, but Rhythm Heaven is still a big get for the Nintendo Switch, and it's obviously is going to be playable on the Nintendo Switch 2. So I think, if there was a time for Rhythm Heaven, it would be now, before the Switch 2 is released, or maybe, at least announced before the Switch 2 releases. So yeah, I think, I'm not sure if it will be a new one or something like a port of the 3DS game. I'm kind of feeling it will be a new one just because it will give them the opportunity to make like new mini games, new micro games, new rhythm games for the game. And they already, like, as I mentioned, they already did something like a big remix of all the games on the 3DS. And so I think it makes sense to have a new one. It's like a little, I mean, obviously they put a lot of effort into the 3DS one, so it would make sense if they wanted to port it over. But still, I think a new game is more likely than a port of a older Rhythm Heaven game. But yeah, if I had to like give that a percentage, I think that's like 50-50. It's a little lower than the Fire Emblem, but I think it's more likely than a lot of the other things I'm gonna mention in a pretty fast blitz after I talk about Mario Baseball. But yeah, Mario Baseball, Mario Sports. We haven't had a new one since 2023, so it would make sense to have, not even 2023, 2022 with Mario Strikers Battle League. So it makes sense to have a new one here. I'm not sure it'll be made by Camelot. It could be made by Bandai Namco, who made the other Mario Baseball games, or at least the most recent one, Mario Sluggers. But I think it would be, again, Mario Baseball, a Mario Sports title is just a cool thing to have in a system that maybe can't get like, or Nintendo does not want to put like their big games on it, but they still have some cool games to put on it. Mario Baseball sounds really cool, and it sounds like a fun game just to have on your Switch. Again, I don't know if they're gonna reiterate that all the games are backwards compatible with the Switch 2. I think that'd be pretty cool if they did that, but again, I don't know. I think they should reiterate that at least at some point in the direct, and so everyone knows like, ooh, I can play whatever games I see here on my Nintendo Switch 2 when I get my Nintendo Switch 2, and not be worried that, oh, I'm gonna buy this game now, but I'm not gonna be able to play it much once I get my Switch 2. You'll be able to play it at any time. I didn't really make many predictions for what I think we'll see in these. Again, as I said with Rhythm Heaven, I think we'll see a new game, some new mini games, maybe new characters, maybe one character that can appear in Smash one day. Mario Baseball, I think it's gonna be a new one as well. I think that they're gonna try to maybe move away from the update focused Mario sports games that we got with like Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush, and Mario Strikers Battle League. And I guess we'll also with Nintendo Switch Sports. But I think we're gonna move away from that a little bit. I think the roster is gonna be very close to complete when this new Mario Sluggers releases. Maybe we'll get some new stadiums and new arenas and stuff like that. But I think we're going to see a lot of the main game just right in this direct. I think we're going to see a bunch of new characters. Obviously we could see Pauline as a new character. I would love to see something like a Captain Toad as a new character. I don't think we're going to see Captain Toad, but I think I would love to see Captain Toad in this direct. Some kind. We will mention a little bit of Captain Toad a little later, but I think we'll see some new characters. I think we'll see some new arenas. Maybe some that are based on maybe Mario and Luigi, the new Mario and Luigi Brothership. Maybe some that are based on Super Mario Odyssey. Maybe something based on Luigi's Mansion, the Luigi's Mansion series, Luigi Mansion Dark Moon, or Luigi Mansion 3, something like that. But I think it will be a new Mario Baseball. I think these two, Rhythm Heaven and Mario Baseball, will be new games, or new. At least Mario Sports, I think it'll be a new game. I think Rhythm Heaven will be a new game. Obviously, I think it would be fine for them to port over like Sluggers from the Wii, but I think it's been long enough since Sluggers. I think it's time for a new one. It might be a little disappointing to see Sluggers just be the one that comes over, unless they do make a lot of the changes I'm saying here to the Sluggers. Maybe add like a couple more characters. Some new stages from the Switch games, something like that. Maybe even the 3DS games or the DS games since Sluggers released. But I think that is really all I have for like things that I feel like are 50-50 or higher. Everything else, I'm optimistic could show up in this direct. If any of these other things show up, I wouldn't be surprised if something like a new Rhythm Heaven doesn't show up, or a new Mario Baseball doesn't show up. I'm pretty confident Metroid Prime, Kirby, and Fire Emblem, but if those two didn't show up, I think one of those games, one of the games I'm about to mention here, would replace one of those two. And that would be something like a F-Zero new game. I'm not very confident in that one, but something like F-Zero GX not remake or I guess it could be a remaster, but I would just call it like F-Zero HD, F-Zero GX HD, a port of the GameCube game. I think they will try their hand in doing a new F-Zero at some point in the future, but I think they would want to at least see how popular the newer F-Zeros were, because obviously F-Zero 99 is very popular still. I go on there, there's at least, I can probably match up with at least like 30 people on average, even at slow times. I would like times I would consider slow times. I can at least match up with 30 people. So there's at least, a third of a lobby always playing. And so I think that's pretty good still, being that the game came out about 1.5 years ago. So, and they still consistently update that game. But the F-Zeros that released after are somewhat different. They have different mechanics and everything. I would consider them maybe a little more complex than F-Zero 99 or the original F-Zero that F-Zero 99 is based off of. And so I feel like if they want to do a new F-Zero one day, they're going to try to at least test the market of in some way to see if, the audience would want to buy a new F-Zero. And I think that would come in the form of F-Zero GX HD or an F-Zero GX 4K when the Switch 2 comes out. But if there was a time for them to do that, I think now would be that time. Again, it's really interesting to talk about this direct in the context that we already know the Switch 2 direct is happening. And so it's like, I guess it's the same thing like I would be thinking about like during the 3DS era. What type of games does Nintendo plan to have for the Switch? We are in a different situation than the 3DS era because these games will be playable on the Switch too. But I don't think they're going to be focusing too much of their development resources, at least in-house, on Nintendo Switch games. And so it's just like a little bit of we're obviously in a transitional period. So I think F-Zero GX would be cool to have right now, and it would be a good way to test the market for a new F-Zero. But it also runs the risk of the possibility that some people are mainly only looking forward to the Switch 2, so they're not really looking backwards right now, at least. And so releasing F-Zero GX may not be as successful as it could be if maybe they released it on the Switch 2 or when the Switch 2 was already out. But still, if the reason why I was mentioning like a shadow drop here earlier with Metroid Prime is because I could see GX being shadow dropped. And I think that could help it a little bit because, that will get a lot of buzz on it. It's F-Zero GX available now. A lot of news articles in the gaming industry could be written about it like that. I think that'd be pretty cool. But I think that could be a smaller announcement, as a headline, somewhere within the direct. But again, we'll have to see. I think it's like a 30% chance that I think we'll see it. If we do get like a GameCube or a Wii game ported over, I think it would be Metroid Prime 2. But F-Zero is still cool. Another game that kind of falls into that is Star Fox. Like it would be a new game. Would get Star Fox Adventures HD. I would love to see a new Star Fox game. And when I do my Nintendo Switch 2 predictions, direct predictions in a couple of days, I'll probably release that early next week. But once I do that, you all will see that I am predicting that we will see a new Star Fox game there. But obviously they could announce that here too. I might have to change my predictions a lot depending on what we see in this direct. But I think something like a Star Fox Adventures port from the GameCube HD from the GameCube would be pretty cool. Again, it would fall into like that vein that I think we're gonna see a lot of remakes and remasters in this direct, not necessarily like new experiences, new games. I could be proven wrong to a very dramatic degree, like I was last June, but I think at a certain point we are gonna reach that point where any Switch 1 news we get will be more oriented towards like remasters and remakes. And if we are there at this point, I think something like a Star Fox Adventures remake, remaster, port of some kind will be pretty cool, and that'll be a nice little ode to the Star Fox series, and maybe again test the market for a new Star Fox game, maybe a new Star Fox Adventures, but something in the Star Fox series. The final game that I have listed here, like in this category of like, if I could see, Rhythm Heaven or Mario Baseball not being in this direct, what could I see replace it? The final game I have is 2D Donkey Kong. I know that's kind of like, I spent this whole time talking about, I don't know how much time Nintendo really wants to devote to the Switch, to like, I guess not time, but development resource they want to commit to the Switch right now. I think if there is a big game besides Metroid Prime or Pokemon Legends ZA, which I'll mention in a couple of minutes, I think it could be Donkey Kong, a new Donkey Kong game. We just got a Donkey Kong Country HD released on the Switch earlier this year in January, on the same day that Nintendo Switch 2 was revealed. So we just got that, but we've seen Nintendo is willing to do a couple of different entries in a similar genre, similar series in the same year as we saw with Mario RPGs in the last year and a half. So I wouldn't rule it out completely if they are working on a new 2D Donkey Kong, that it could be announced here, that they will be completely fine announcing it here. Again, Donkey Kong is getting a big push nowadays with obviously with Country HD just releasing, but Country Returns HD releasing. But we also are seeing that, the park in Japan just opened up for Donkey Kong Country. The Florida park that will be opening up in general, Nintendo World, Super Nintendo World in May, will include a Donkey Kong segment. Donkey Kong gets prominently in the movies. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see a new Donkey Kong game of some kind here. That could be the big closer, and maybe Metro Prime's in the middle, and then maybe Kirby becomes like a little bit of a headline. But I think it's possible. It's the last thing I think I'm gonna say here that I would say that is like, it's like possible, but like not super likely. I think it'd be cool. I don't know who would work on it, because presumably Retro is still, putting the final touches on Metroid Prime 4, so they probably can't work on it. There was a rumor a little bit, maybe like a year or two ago, that the studio that works on 3D Mario, like the EPD, the Nintendo Entertainment Planning Division, Development Division, was working on a new 2D Donkey Kong, or like a new 2D game, and that could be this, at the same time while they're working on a new 3D Mario. If that's true, if that rumor is true and that speculation is true, I think this would be the time to announce it. Especially if it is playable on the Switch, this will be the time to announce it. You know, in a lot of ways, this is the final hoorah for the Nintendo Switch. It will more than likely be the final Nintendo Direct that's focused on the Nintendo Switch exclusively. So I think they would want to get, you know, go out on like the biggest bang of sorts, you know, the biggest, you know, I guess if they want to go out on like the biggest bang or the biggest, you know, biggest hoorah of sorts, it would be a new Donkey Kong. And I think that, you know, I think again, as I mentioned, it's possible, not super likely in my opinion, but a new Donkey Kong would still be pretty cool. So the final segment I have here is just things that came to mind when I was thinking about things to predict, but I'm not, you know, some most of these things aren't very likely, if even possible. You know, I mentioned, you know, Pokemon Legends EA. Pokemon Company has really moved away from doing announcements and directs. Obviously, we still do see them once in a while. We saw the June 2023 direct that was the first time we saw gameplay for the Pokemon DLCs for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So they will appear in directs once in a while, but we just got a direct for Pokemon Legends. I mean, not a direct, a trailer for Pokemon Legends EA in the most recent Pokemon Presents. That was at the time that this direct will air, a month before it. So I don't think they're gonna want to show off anything new just yet. Again, if this direct does span, you know, farther than well, if it does span farther than normal directs do, that, you know, maybe we see announcements for next year for the Nintendo Switch from Nintendo themselves. Maybe we see Pokemon Legends EA here, but it's not something that, like, I think the other things I said earlier are more likely than seeing Pokemon Legends EA. But still, you know, again, it's possible, not super likely, or even very likely in my opinion, but still, I think something like Pokemon Legends EA, we see some maybe new Mega Evolutions, you know, of some kind, or I guess that's really all they could show right now before a new, like, Pokemon Presents probably in August. So maybe we see a new Mega, but maybe we see at least just maybe a new mention of the game. But I think, you know, the things I mentioned earlier are a little more likely, and those are the things I'm actually predicting. These things are just mainly like hopes. I did mention movie news. I mentioned kind of like alluding to a Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong has been becoming more prevalent in the movies and just Nintendo's media presence in general. We didn't get any movie news on Mario Day when I thought we would for the Mario movie. So if we do have any news, maybe we do see it here. But I'm still, you know, they don't really need to do the same push that they did in 2022 for the Mario movie's release in 2023 anymore, just because it did become a huge success for them. I'm sure a lot of people know that there's a sequel to the Mario movie that already exists. And so I guess, you know, it would be cool to talk about it, maybe do some casting announcements, like they did in September 2021. But I don't think it's like something that they need to do anymore. You know, they I think they have the ability, if they want to not have to have all the news about the movie in like a Super Mario movie direct or just Nintendo directs in general. That's not to say that I don't think that we will see the trailers appear in like Mario movie 2 directs or anything like that. But I don't think they need like a huge push within a general direct anymore to get like people's eyes on the movie. I think they are at the point now where they don't really need to. They can like release any news and it will still be pretty viewed. It can be viewed widely now. Obviously, the other movie is the Zelda movie, but so I guess Zelda movie. Honestly, Zelda movie news would be a little more likely, just because we don't really know much about it yet. We could see some casting there, but again, the main thing that's honestly keeping me away from being more confident in the movie news is just because they did just mainly say that the direct will be only, or not only, but focused mainly on Nintendo Switch games. And so, like, before they usually had like a way to get out of that, you know, by mentioning it will be mainly focused on the Nintendo Switch and games releasing on Nintendo Switch. This time they mentioned that the direct will feature around 30 minutes of upcoming games for the Nintendo Switch. they don't really like say anything about focusing on it. It's just as we will be talking about games for the Nintendo Switch. So it's not as easy of a way out if they want to talk about something that wasn't Nintendo video games related. So I think movie news is possible again, but not super likely in my opinion. These other things are basically just, hopes that one day we see a new Kid Icarus. I would love to see a new Kid Icarus. I would love to see Kid Icarus Uprising HD. Maybe that's a little bit more likely than a new Kid Icarus, but I think it depends on what Sakurai is doing. If Sakurai's new game is a Kid Icarus, maybe we see that here. But again, you all will hear in my Switch 2 direct predictions. I think we will see Sakurai's new game there and not really here. Pikmin, I'm predicting more so a Pikmin 4 DLC. I guess I could also predict maybe Super Mario Wonder DLC, but I don't think that those things will necessarily happen. We probably would have got them at some point last year if they were gonna happen. There's also rumors about Pikmin 2D Pikmin. At some point, like after the last June direct, there was rumors about a new Pikmin 2D game being in the development, pipeline. That could be announced here, but again, I'm mainly speaking in terms of Pikmin 4 DLC. I don't really think we will see much of Pikmin before the Switch 2 is announced or releases. I think we will see Pikmin 5 at some point on the Nintendo Switch 2, but I don't think we'll see much about Pikmin 4 or like a new Pikmin spin-off game in this direct. Captain Toad, I would love a new Captain Toad. Again, now that we are this late into the generation and the team that works on 3D Mario, which also works on Captain Toad, is probably working on a new 3D Mario and maybe even a new 2D Donkey Kong. I think Captain Toad's probably out of the picture for at least a couple more years. It would be cool to see it announced, but I'm a little, I've become a little understanding of where we are now in the generation. I thought maybe earlier in the generation we could see new Captain Toad, but we're late in the generation. We are expecting to see new games that aren't Captain Toad related from that studio or that section of Nintendo. So I think Captain Toad is pretty unlikely. Mario Party DLC is something that I have been predicting for a while. Not just Jamboree, but I also predicted Super Mario Party DLC a little while ago when those for those directs, and then obviously Mario Party Superstars DLC when that game was like the big Mario Party. But that's just something I wanted to mention. Maybe we see DLC again. Maybe we see DLC now. That this is going to probably be the main Mario Party for at least a couple more years. Maybe we see a new board added or maybe some new characters. But again, we are at the point where they're probably working on another Mario Party, whether that be Mario Party Superstars 2 or just a wholly new one. So I'm not sure how, ND Cube would or I guess they're not even called Nintendo Cube. What Nintendo Cube would be focusing on, if that would be DLC or a new Mario Party. The final two first party things I want to talk about was NSO. I think we will see some NSO drops here. So this isn't even like a unlikely thing. I think we will see NSO drops here. But they're just like something. I don't think we're gonna see any major drops here. It would be cool to see like maybe a couple more rare games come over, or maybe. Well, I'm not really sure what's on the N64 N64 NSO app right now, so I can't really make too many big predictions for that. But it would be cool to see some, maybe some more obscure games come over. I know the big thing with NSO is that obviously Nintendo needs to probably pay for the license to get a lot of these games onto it that aren't their own. And so even with the rare games, I'm sure they probably have enough ownership in them that they're able to bring them over without having too much of an issue. But, obviously with like non-first party games, it's probably a lot harder to bring over. And so I'm not that, I think whatever we see from NSO will be really cool tomorrow. I'm pretty confident we'll see something from NSO, but I don't really know what. The final thing I wanted to predict for first party is a new Pilot Wings. Yes, a new Pilot Wings. I hope a new Pilot Wings happens. I love Pilot Wings Resort. I haven't really talked much about Pilot Wings on this channel. I think again, this would be a great time, something small, something fun to bring over to the Nintendo Switch. And if it goes along with what I want to predict in my Switch 2 predictions of a new Nintendo Land, maybe we can have a Pilot Wings Nintendo Land combo of everything on Woohoo Island, and I think it's really great. I think it'd just be really great. That's just the main thing I just want to talk about Pilot Wings for like like a minute or so. I would love to see a new Pilot Wings. The final things I wanted to mention here are third-party things. We have a couple of level 5 games that do need to receive updates. I don't think Nintendo ever acknowledged the new Fantasy Life date that I believe is in May or early June. So I would expect to see that here. Maybe a new update on Professor Layton. I'm not sure if that was delayed to 2026, but if it wasn't and it still has its 2025 release date, I would expect to see that here. Obviously we have a couple of other games for level 5. Izuma 11, I think is what it's called. We can see those games from level 5. We have the new Yokai Watch. I'm not sure if it's a spin-off or just a direct successor to Yokai Watch. We have that game they can also show off. But I think we will see at least something from level 5. We do have Dragon Quest 1+2 HD 2D that we could see. We could see maybe a new Bravely Default, maybe a port from like a remake or remaster from the 3DS games. We could see something from Sega. I would love to see something from Sega. I'm just looking at my bingo card right now, which I'll put down on the screen right now because the bingo card is mainly what I got a lot of these predictions from. So you guys will see right now old Nintendo Revival. I'm seeing like F-Zero, even though I have an F-Zero spot on there. But like Sega, I think that'd be cool. I have something on this bingo card. I guess this is also where I can just talk about the bingo card for a little bit. I mentioned most of everything on here. New Nintendo Warriors game, that would fall into like the area where I had Pokemon and Pikmin. It'd be cool to see it, but I'm not super, confident we will ever see a new Nintendo Warriors, at least for right now, all released on the Nintendo Switch. And then I also put the Zelda ports, the Zelda HD ports from the Wii U. Again, I would love to see the Zelda HD ports come to Nintendo Switch, but we are at the point where I think those can be more prevalent later in the year, where we, maybe the Switch 2 has all the focus from Nintendo, but they still want to release something big for Nintendo Switch and like later in the year. We could see that here again if they are planning to reveal most or all of their games for the year for Nintendo Switch, but still, it's like a thing where hopefully we see it, but it would be nice to see it, but I think we will either see it now or we'll see it on the Switch too. And I guess the last thing I have on here, now behind the bingo card, I mentioned Sega. I would love to see something from Sega, but I guess the last thing we could talk about is I have Super Mario 3D Land HD. I predicted that in my last bingo card, or the last prediction video, that maybe we see Super Mario 3D Land. I think that's really cool. I love 3D Land, but I don't know. I mean, it would be cool, but I'm not sure that's something they're really prioritizing right now. If anything, they'll probably prioritize Super Mario Galaxy 2, but still, I would love to see a new Super Mario 3D Land. I guess the last thing on the bingo card is Xbox port. The same thing with like the third-party stuff. It'd be cool to see a new Xbox port make it over to the Nintendo Switch, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. But that is all I have for you all today. I really love doing these prediction videos, just talking about some of the thoughts I have going into Nintendo Direct. I will have a reaction tomorrow for the Direct, obviously, so I hope to see you all there. Again, if you all have your own predictions for this Direct, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I would love to read any of your own predictions. Maybe you have a game that you would love to see announced for the Nintendo Switch, but you're just not sure it's possible right now. But yeah, without further ado, I hope you all enjoyed this prediction video. I hope you all enjoy the Nintendo Direct tomorrow at 7 a.m. PT, 10 a.m. ET, and I will see you all then. So make sure it makes you happy, because it rhymes generic happy, and I will see you on the next one. Good. goodbye. Nintendo Direct in less than 24 hours. We gotta get very hyped. Nintendo Direct.